So we need to figure out what the answer to the questions of video 3, what those were all about. The first one was actually pretty easy. What language did the Shawnee speak? The Chickasaw and the Yuchi and Cherokee. What were the four, I guess I'll say, the four most prominent Native American tribes in Kentucky? So this is actually a really easy answer. It's just the Shawnee spoke Shawnee language. The Chickasaw speaks the Chickasaw language. Yuchi speaks Yuchi language, and Cherokee speaks Cherokee, right? So Chickasaw speak Chickasaw, Shawnee speaks Shawnee, Yuchi, Cherokee. It doesn't always work out that way, but it did work out with that way with these languages. The Shawnee language is a Central Algonquian language related to other Algonquian languages, such as Kickapoo and Sac and Fox. Chickasaw language is a Muskogean language. The Chickasaw language is also agglutinative, agglutinative. So it's agglutinative, right? And it follows the pattern of subject, object, verb. So Bob, ball, through. That's how it would be. Bob, ball, through. Subject, object, verb. That's how the Chickasaw language is, which it matters because the verb is the very last thing and that has the most emphasis. So you got Bob and you got the ball. Well, what happened with Bob and the ball? Threw. He threw the ball. Okay, that's good because my mind started wondering. I'm like, whoa, what's he doing with this ball? He just threw it, you know. But the verb is like that's the main thing. Like, what is the relationship between the subject and the direct object? The Chickasaw language is spoken by Chickasaw people in Oklahoma today. Okay, so we got Chickasaw people who's in Oklahoma today, and the Chickasaw language is very similar to the Choctaw language. Very similar. Cherokee language is an Iroquoian language. So actually all of them come from bigger families, languages, right? You have an Algonquin language, which is a Shawnee. The Muskogean language is the Chickasaw is part of a Muskegean language group. The Shawnee is part of the Algonquin language group, and then you have the Cherokee language, which is part of an Iroquoian language group. That's what comes up to the Yuchi language. The Yuchi language is a language isolate, so it's the only language which there's no family. It's just by itself. The Yuchi language is only I saw a video, all the languages dying out. Yeah, I mean, you guys have a language isolate. Only the Yuchi people know the Yuchi language, whereas Shawnee language, I mean, it's Algonquin, so it's similar to Kickapoo, Sac and Fox. The Chickasaw language is similar to the Choctaw language, and you know, I'm sure the Cherokee, it's the Iroquoian language, so the Cherokee, you know, there's about 6 other Iroquoian tribes. I don't know if they had the same, but you know, the Oneida, Onondaga, Tuscarora. So the Cherokee language is the Iroquoian. It's still spoken today. It's also a polysynthetic language, and it uses a unique syllabary writing system. So the Cherokee language, I couldn't even write like how you say the hello in Cherokee. I couldn't even write it down because it's in pictures. All the words of the Cherokee language is like pictographs. It's like little tiny pictures, kind of like Chinese, only instead of, you know, a symbol per word, it's a symbol for a letter. So it's kind of like a mixture of Chinese language and English language. The hello, right? OCO. That's how you pronounce it, but I don't have like the actual writing. OCO is what you say in Cherokee, but when you write it, it's different. It's pictures. Whereas Bezon and Sage Lee, a lot of these, the smarter ones, they go and do what Haitian Creole does, and they write language phonetically. So it's an oral language that's been spoken for a long time, but when they go to write it down, they write how it sounds. So that way, every word and every letter corresponds specifically to each sound, and there aren't any like weird ass, extra letters or extra words. Enough, in. E-N-U-F. That's enough. E-N-U-F. That's all you need in order to understand phonetically what enough is. E-N-U-F. But E-N-O-U-G-H, right? That's E-no-ugah. E-no-ugah. Right? If you were to pronounce it exactly phonetically, what enough actually says. E-N-O-U-G-H. What's G? Guh. There's no E-guh. It's enough. It's an F. So what's the GH for? Why does GH mean F? So enough is enough, but enough is too much. And so phonetically, that's how all these languages should write. All the Shawnee language, the Yuchi language, Chickasaw, it looks like they use phonetic language, but the Cherokee, they use different sort of pictograph. And I hope these languages could carry on. I also know that it's hard to learn a whole nother language. The language isolate, it means there's only one of its kind. It doesn't belong to any family. That was question 14. What is a agglutinative? Agglutinative? Man, I can't even say it. Agglutinative. Agglutinative. It's like agglutinative. So agglutinative is Chickasaw and Turkish language. So the Chickasaw is agglutinative, and agglutinative is a process in linguistic morphology in which complex words are formed by stringing morphemes, which is a sound of the word, each with a single grammatical or semantic meaning, right? So, example, Turkish word evlerinizden, okay? That's all one word, but it's all a bunch of little words, and that whole word, even though it's only one word, the whole phrase means from your houses, right? So pick up the things from your houses. If I was telling everybody to bring a dish, everybody bring a dish out of your houses, right? From your houses. Evlerinizden is from your houses, but it consists of all these morphemes, ev, ler, iniz, and din. So it contains 4 different morphemes, each one with a different meaning, right? One is the house, plural, your, and from. Okay, so all 4 of those things had specific either semantic or actual like verb and subject differentiations. But ev, ler, ines, din is all one word, but it actually means like a little bit of a phrase. The Germans are like this a little bit, but they change it a little bit. They say it's a fusional or an inflecting synthetic type of language, which is somehow different than agglutinative. Agglutinative, it's, synthetic. They just kind of put all those words together. They just bring all these words and meanings together. And I think sometimes you can only say the word by itself. You have to tack it all together. And this is, I don't know, this is all linguistics, and you're not going to like linguistics. But if you get into languages, I think that's really key to, we have lots of similar things when it comes to our languages. Simon Gertie was able to pick up all these different languages and be able to speak them. You have all these people that take all the time to learn Latin and Greek and all these different, and learning a language is hard. To be able to put in that much time and effort to actually learn a whole nother language, and especially if you don't use it, frequently. If I learned Chickasaw, who would I speak Chickasaw, to? I would know that it was agglutinative, and I would be attaching all these words and phrases together. But who would know? Who would know if I was evlerinizden, if I actually put all that together, if it was all separate, whatever. So polysynthetic. This is relating to the Cherokee language. Polysynthetic in linguistic topology. Polysynthetic languages are highly synthetic languages, which are languages which have words that are made up of many morphemes. Right? So agglutinative is polysynthetic. German is polysynthetic. But agglutinative is polysynthetic in a different way than the way German is. Polysynthetic, so you have all these words that are made up of many morphemes. Algonquin and Iroquois languages are polysynthetic. Yeah, I think the Chickasaw and Turkish languages would be too. But polysynthetic languages typically have long sentence words, such as you pick word Tuntussaquacartonic Satan Quig Tug, which means he had not yet said again that he was going to hunt reindeer. So that whole word, you have to put them all together in order to make it make sense. It's one word, but it's actually an entire sentence. The only word you could put by itself would have just been reindeer, because reindeer was the main, the direct object, and then everything else was what's going on with that reindeer. So none of the other morphemes can appear in isolation. All the rest of them had to be tacked on to the word reindeer. So that's it. The U-pick word, U-Y-U-P-I-K. So that's polysynthetic, agglutinative. I don't know. I wondered what they were, so I put them in there. They also relate to the Chickasaw and the Cherokee languages. I don't know. If you get curious into these languages, you're welcome. If you don't, then all that probably just bored you, and I apologize. This last question is one of the biggest questions, and I don't know if I'll have time to get into the things that I'm reading right here, right now, about the mysterious mound builders, right? Who are the mound builders? Where did the mound builders come from? Are they Shawnee? Are they Creek? Are they Cherokee? Are they Yuchi? Are they Delaware? Are they Ottawa or Ojibwa or Potawatomi, or Piankeshaw. Or is it a Piankeshaw? I want to know right now. Did a Piankeshaw build the Serpent Mound? In Ohio, there's a Serpent Mound, a mound that goes in the side of a snake. Who did it? Nobody knows. They said, you know, a lot of the racist people would say, oh, it must have been built by a different civilization because these folks are just too uncivilized. Well, Cahokia had like 40,000 people at one time. So, and these were civilized, actually, a lot, their agriculture were more civilized than the Europeans. It was more evolved than the Europeans. Really, the only thing that the Native Americans didn't have that the Europeans had was a better immune system. They didn't have an immune system. They didn't have the guns or the weapons, and guns, germs, and steel, right? And they didn't have the steel in order to be able to build the stuff during the Industrial Revolution. So, the Europeans just kind of were lucky people in history. So the eras, okay, the eras of the older people. Before I was telling you about the time periods, according to me, postmodern era is after 2000, right? You got this new evolved technologically. The internet's changing everything. So it's not millennials and it's not generation Y, Z, and X and all the other things. There's only postmodern and then there's modern, okay? So there's after the internet and before the internet. That's, I think it's, the internet is that huge, okay? It's a Gutenberg printing press revolution. So postmodern is after 2000. Before postmodern, you had the modern age, which would be all the 1900s and the 1800s. Before the modern age, you had the historic era, which is the 1600s and the 1700s, which is needs to be filled up. Okay, so I want to write actually a book about every Native American that had died in Kentucky and document each one of them, and then we can find out, you know, who give their life, you know, on this land, on this dark and bloody ground. If you give your life for the ground, I think that your future generations do have a claim to that land. You know, well, who says you own that land? Well, I died on it, right? My blood was staining that dirt right there. Historic period, 1600, 1700, then the prehistory, right? All the way back to either 1300 BC or 13,000 BC or 9500 BC. So it's got that big chunk of history, right? 1600s, that's us only going back 400 years ago. But go back 13,000 years ago, that's when the first Kentuckians actually start coming into Kentucky. And how do we divide that period up? Okay, so that period, that big chunk, is actually even further dissected into 4 or 5 other periods. You have the Paleo-Indian period, and in the Paleo-Indian period, in each one you should know a little bit about. You know, the Paleo-Indian period, they would find the Clovis points, the arrowheads, right next to the mastodon and the woolly mammoths. And so since they found the arrowheads right next to these big games, they assumed that the Paleo-Indians were able to chisel a rock, put it onto a stick, and be able to attack mastodons and mammoths. That they found mastodons and mammoths in Big Bone Salt Lick in northern Kentucky. So they, you know, we have mastodons, we got woolly mammoths, we got bison, and then the Paleo Indians were going around stabbing them, and there were nomads. They would follow them. They would eat for weeks, I guess, once they finally was able to kill one of these woolly mammoths or these bison, you know, for the whole tribe. They followed the tribe, and then eventually it goes to the Archaic period. So there's something that was different between, oh yeah, the big game all died out, so they had to figure out other ways in order to hunt, in order to feed themselves. The big game wasn't around, so the Archaic period. Then you had the Woodland period, which it's easy to remember the Woodland period because it was 1000 AD to 1000 BC. It's a 2000 period, and it's like the zero, right? Jesus is right in the middle of it, 1,000 years before Christ, and then 1,000 years afterwards. That's the Woodland period. After the Woodland period, that's when you get the Mississippian period, or the Fort Ancient period, or the sort of the Shawnee period in the more modern Native Americans of today. That's and then afterwards, like the historic era. So the main ones would be the Paleo Indians, Archaic period, Woodland. Mississippi and Fort Ancient culture actually probably run parallel with each other, and anytime you talk about, you know, the Gilded Age or the nadir era of race relations or the immigration or the Civil War, whenever you talk about any era, really it comes to who you're talking to and if they accept the same definition for that era as you are saying what it is. I didn't get to reading any of the questions, I didn't get to reading this book, because I had to answer all these questions. But let's, who cares? Okay, what are two time periods for today's people? The Archaic era of Kentucky's first peoples ends about 2,000 years ago, with its ending defined by what? When does the Archaic period actually end? What Cherokee and his crippled friend, either named Will or Jack, was murdered by Edward Ned Mitchell and John Livingston on February 10th, 1797 in Clay County, Kentucky, while he was sleeping in a cave? What period is situated between the Archaic hunter-gatherers and the agricultural Mississippian culture? So what is in between the Archaic and the Mississippian period? Also, that period, you have two other cultures that comes out of that period. I mentioned something about it, but and then this last question: what Native American tribe did Ben Franklin say was America's backyard experiment? So one of the Native Americans, we got so much stuff out from them that it was called the Backyard America, right? The Backyard American Experiment, which was one of the tribes. Which one of these tribes was Ben Franklin talking about? And we'll get to the answers coming up.